All right, we're talking about the seven mountains some more, and I've done three little videos on questions and controversies surrounding the seven mountains and the seven mountain message, the seven mountain mandate. We covered it, whether the seven mountains is dominionism in the first short video. The second one had to do with, is the seven mountain message elitist in nature? Third one was, does the seven mountains diminish the church? And I recommend, if you're interested in any of those titles, of course, looking them up on our YouTube channel. And today I want to talk a little bit about another question, accusation, controversy. Is this was something I was confronted with years ago by people in the prayer movement, and they said, Johnny, we're concerned that the Seven Mountain message diminishes prayer. And so that's the question: does the Seven Mountain message, the Seven Mountain mandate, diminish prayer or the prayer movement? And so I'm going to be careful how I say this. Let me just say right up front that for sure we don't need to pray any less. Nobody needs to pray any less. And so none of what I'm going to say will be designed in any way to be taken as something that diminishes prayer. But I did tell them right up front, even the leaders of the prayer movement that I talked to at that time years ago, I said, well, prayer is of supreme importance, but you have overvalued what it can do. I was part of thinking that way too, those processes. We're going to through prayer, we're going to create sheep nations. We're going to rule and reign in the heavens through decrees, declarations, through prophetic acts, and particularly the part I didn't fall into as much, but there was a view that we get, these high-level apostles, high-level prophets, and they're going to fly over regions and areas and make proclamations, and there might be some salt that goes in water and some oil that gets dumped on some places, and I'm not against any of those, but the idea that in itself would turn a nation into a sheep nation or would bring transformation, it was widely thought through in much of the prayer movement, and to the degree they had impact in the niche of the church, they had impact. And so history itself has clearly told us that that's not going to happen. And there are definite changes and shifts that can take place through prayer. With the famous chronicle scripture, "If my people, which are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray, then I'll pour out a blessing on them." And but we have to understand that pouring out a blessing because of prayer is still different than nations walking to the light of the sons of God. And so part of this processing is understanding the value of doing and praying and doing. And I think the best picture for it is perhaps revealed in when Moses was on the mountain. You all know the story of Moses on the mountain, and when his hands are lifted up, when the sons of Hur lift his hands up, then in the battle, Joshua in the battlefield, he's winning. And so if his hands are down, they lose. If his hands are up, they win. That right there tells us, there's a picture there for us, a prophetic parallel picture, you could say, that says, yeah, prayer is important. That which happens on the mountaintop is important. You win or lose based on that. So that tells us the value of prayer. Now, if you understand the obvious unspoken part I just revealed to you, that if this exercise on the top of the mountain is not coordinated in some way with Joshua in the valley, then Moses is just exercising. He's just going this and that, and it matters not at all because no one's actually on the battlefield. So we want to recognize that the battlefield is the seven mountains, and particularly the tops of the mountains are where the battlefield is the most intense. And so we want to have prayer, we want to have prophetic words, declarations, we want to do everything from the mountaintop that can be done, and that was established even through the example of Moses. But we want to begin to learn how to join in that, not just have the prayer movement. When you overrate the prayer movement, you think all we need is everybody on the mountaintop. And if you perhaps don't value it enough, you think we just need everybody on the battlefield. And we have both of those extremes in the body of Christ. We have people that the answer to everything is pray, and some the answer to everything is do. And we want to begin to champion and understand how praying and doing have to go together. I don't believe you can sub out your prayer life. And so the idea that we have professional people that do the praying, so you don't have to. I don't believe in that. Having said that, I don't, by professional, I don't think it's wrong to have people pray for you and you pay them for it. If they're intercessors, we have people that run businesses doing that. I think it's a wise thing, but it should not be done with the thought that you're subbing it out to them because you don't want to do it. We have, again, the tendency is the doers want to sub out their prayer life to the prayers, and then we have the prayers wanting to sub out the doing to the doers. In some kind of way, it can work. But I think the idea of the Lord is to have us be able to do both in some capacity. And I will just say this: when you interact with people on the tops of the mountains, and I've interacted with many hundreds and hundreds of government people in multiple nations. That's just the mountain of government. Many producers, directors, actors, elements of Hollywood, and I could go on every one of the mountains. Whenever you interact with people, particularly in positions of influence, and it's because people of influence are going up against high-level demonic stuff. They're people who influence millions, and the enemy knows that, so it's foolish to try to go up there with only ideas or words. You have to go prayed up. Your prayer life will be good if you go on up these mountains and you take on enemies, giants greater and mightier than you. The Lord said to the children of Israel, I'm going to send you to land of the Hittites, Jebusites, Girgashites, etc., 7 enemy nations greater and mightier than you. Once you know you're going up against something that's greater and mightier than you, you know you have to go in the power of prayer. But you also go. Again, back to that analogy was Joshua in Joshua 1, when he was told, it says, Moses, my servant, is dead. It's a new time. And only be strong and of great courage. Why? Because he's going to go. He has to go. He has to do something. To be strong and courageous. Over and over, be strong and courageous. Everywhere the sole of your feet touches, that is what I've given you. So I do not think we can take something in the Spirit just by praying it. It's again, natural military will tell you that there's what the air power can do, and we have seen those who've been around and watched the United States' campaign against Iraq and other things. Powerful, impressive bombing, but until the ground troops hold the territory, it really was shock and awe, but it didn't do what they needed it to do. But on the other hand, if you do try to do the ground troops assault without the air backing you up, then you're also foolishly moving. But we want to begin to be able to know how to incorporate doing both. That we want to be people prayed up. We want to have prayer support, and so that's valuable. We don't want to diminish the prayer movement, and we don't want to diminish prayer at all. But the idea that as the body of Christ, we're supposed to just rise up as people who pray, that's faulty as well. We have to, everywhere the sole of our feet touches. What does that mean? If you want to see him in government, if you want him to occupy territory in government, you have to occupy with your feet government. You have to be there. You have to be a 9 to 5 person. Not 9 to 5 is, it can be 8 to 6 or whatever. But we're talking about the Monday through Friday practical placement of people in every area of society. The children of Israel could not take Jericho, which was their first promised land, their first city or nation of promise. They could not take it with missiles, with prayer missiles from the desert. They couldn't send prayer missiles. They couldn't send declarations and take it. They had to practically go there. They had to show up with an intent to conquer, you could say, to conquer the enemy, not conquer people. We don't want to think of conquering people in that sense in government or anywhere else. It's not about that. It's conquering darkness. It's conquering the enemy's attempts to do what he wants to do there. But we have to show up, and then he releases the help, the angelic. He pushes over the walls with the angels for us. But we want to value the need to show up in a practical way in every area of society. There's an inside story of Guatemala, and Guatemala made the news. I don't know if you heard it, because after President Trump named Jerusalem as the site of our embassy, that he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's eternal capital. Very controversial and all that. Guatemala did a very bold and hard to do thing because they're a smaller country and they can be intimidated economically. But Guatemala, they seconded the motion, if you want to say, and they said, we recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and we're going to move our embassy there as well. Well, here's the story behind it. Of course, when the president was thinking about this and having some conversation about it, word got out, and I think he made some declaration that he was going to do that, but word got out, and all kinds of nations, and particularly Arab nations, said, you recognize Israel, you recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and all our economic agreements we have are over, and anywhere from something like that or something said worse. There was going to be an economic cost for them to do this brave thing of saying, okay, we're going to agree with what the United States through Trump has done, is recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And so he had made a decision that he was not going to be able to do so. The cost was going to be too high. The president of Guatemala had made that decision. And he was scheduled to have a conversation over the phone with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And I can't remember exactly what it was about. It was to thank him for something. And the inside story that I have is that the interpreter, the translator for him, was a person that I know well. And she's a prayer. She's a prayer person. She's an intercessor. But she also understood the language, and she knew how to interact with government. Her invitation up there was also somebody who had a position in government. She might have been known, I think she was known originally as an intercessor in her church as well. But they were exposed even when I brought to the Seven Mountain message years ago, and it stayed with them, the need to show up in every area of society, and we actually have to have boots on the ground on the mountains. And so one of them invites the other, and so this intercessor, but who's also someone who has some knowledge now about governmental matters and is fully steeped in, we'll say, Seven Mountain thinking, is there. And the president of Guatemala, they put a call in, and 6 consecutive times, if I remember the story correctly, there's like 6 consecutive times they get on the line, they say hello, and the call cuts off. And it's not happening. And it's like, what in the world's going on with our communications? So after the 6th one, I think, the intercessor says, she just gets brave. And she says, Mr. President, I have to tell you something. This is not coincidental what's taking place. This of the phone calls being abruptly cut off, there is the handiwork of God in this. And I'm going to tell you why. You are making a mistake if you do not recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. He wants you to do that. And she goes on and tells him some scriptures and Genesis that says, you bless Israel and you get blessed, and if you curse Israel, you get cursed. And she piles together several scriptures and declarations of such, knowing that he has some level of affinity with the Christian message as well, and more than that, we could say, but I won't go into that part of it. And so she just lets him know that this interruption is being caused by God, giving him time to make an adjustment, and essentially telling him there will be a blessing from God that makes up for whatever cost that takes place in the natural from him having to do this. So he just kind of at her, he wasn't like, oh, really, you think so? It was, from what I understand, it was more like a, and then make the call. And so this time the call goes through. And so in the call, he tells Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I want to thank you, whatever they had done before. And he says, and I also want to let you know, we are also going to join in recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And so we'll be moving our embassy. At spur of the moment, he made a decision. And that's how that decision was made. The story behind the story. So why am I telling you that as it relates to this whole question of the Seven Mountain Mandate versus the prayer movement? Well, there were many, many, many people praying. I think thousands in Guatemala that the president would make the right decision. And indirectly, you could say, well, that's why he did it, because of their prayer. And yes, but here's the other thing. One person who showed up on the mountains, one person bringing to bear their influence is really what caused that whole thing to change. The president was not going to do it just with prayer. There had to be somebody in the proximity of the president telling the president, this is the way you're supposed to do it. And based on that, an adjustment was made. And that's the point I'm making. We're very, very, we're comfortable with raising up prayer movements. We're not comfortable raising Reformation movements or units. And we want to remember even, not that it's supposed to be in that percentage, but in the battle scene in Israel, you have Moses and a couple people on the mountain, and you have the army down there. And his prayer cover for the army was enough. We're doing the reverse. We've got the 10,000 or 100,000 on the prayer mountain, and we got 2 or 3 being activated. That ratio has to change. And if that is considered diminishing the prayer movement, again, I think it's a distortion of that consideration. Once you understand the picture I'm laying out, we need everybody praying. Everybody needs a prayer life. If you participate on the battlefield, I'm sure everyone who's on the battlefield, all the families associated with it, there are inherent dangers on being on the battlefield. You pray up. So it's not like Moses is doing the praying for them, but there is a value in him in a leadership position, doing what he is doing prophetically and as in prayer initiative. So I just want to throw that at you for your consideration and processing, and just encourage us, to continue to value both of these things. I value the prayer movement, and they have made very strategic adjustments to try to make sure that their prayer initiatives do connect much more with people and situations and circumstances on the mountains, and I think that's wonderful. That's part of it. We have a great God who's not, he's not doing it. Well, you're not doing it right. He really wants to reward every kind of effort we will give, and we've known to have prayer efforts, and now he's saying, okay, let's accompany that with actually showing up on the mountains. Let's let your the soles of your feet show up somewhere, and expect an opportunity to bring the kingdom there. Thank you again.